Hello and welcome back to the Final Lap podcast. My name is Josh. I'm joined as always by Sam. We will be going through dissecting everything that happened from the Canadian Grand Prix today. First off, though, Sam, how are you doing? How was your weekend? How did you enjoy the race up in Canada?
Yeah, I had a nice weekend. I thought the race was very entertaining. Certainly not first half of the race, really first three quarters. Maybe left a little bit to be desired. Wasn't the best race I've ever seen, but we certainly got a heck of an ending, and we got a lot to talk about today because of that.
Yeah, the ending is definitely going to be the talking point from the race for sure. First off, though, um, George Russell gets his first win of the season in Canada, wins from pole position. Mercedes also, as a team, have their best day of the season with a double podium finish for their squad, with Antonelli, of course, getting his first podium finish of his F1 career, his young F1 career, with a third place finish right behind Max Verstappen in second. I thought it was a great drive from George. He was really able to control the race. They were able to respond to Max and all of the kind of undercuts that Red Bull was trying to do because of the pace that Russell had and the gap he was able to build. So I thought it was an excellent race from George. And yeah, kind of just, we see these flashes every year from George and from Mercedes. I mean, this season as a whole, he's been extremely good, but there's just these weekends where they pop up and look exceptional, and this was one of those for sure.
Yeah, and it was very impressive because we saw a lot of pace from Max. We saw a lot of pace from the McLarens. It looked like there was a number of times where George was going to get chased down, but Mercedes played the strategy game right, and they clearly had the pace this weekend with a 1-4 in qualifying and then 1-3 in the race. It really makes you hopeful for the rest of the year for them. I know, like you mentioned, they can be a little bit streaky the last couple of years. Last summer, they kind of had a stretch where, for a few races there, they looked like the best team, and then they kind of went back to being third or fourth for most of the rest of the year. So we'll see if they can hold up this form, but certainly this weekend was very promising for Mercedes, and they really played all their cards right here to get George the win.
Yeah, I think it kind of has to be asked, is this George's best season yet in F1? And my answer to that would be yes. I know he has seasons where last year he won a few races. He's won races before in seasons, but just the season as a whole he's putting together this year, multiple podium finishes. He's sitting fourth in the constructor in the drivers championship. Right behind Max and right behind the two McLarens, and the McLarens obviously have the car that they have. So he's kind of really been the best of the rest of the pack, to be honest, so far this year. Like I said, multiple podiums. This is his first win. To me, he's laying down the best season he's had in F1. And, with all the talk of Antonelli coming in this season and how good was he going to stack up to George, and George kind of taking over as the main head at Mercedes, head driver at least. I think he's responded to that great, and obviously I think we both think Antonelli is still extremely talented, and what he's done this year and also in this race he did very well. But George has managed to take over that role, and he's done it very well. He obviously got to learn from one of the best in Lewis Hamilton, and now that this is George's team, in his first season, kind of taking up in that step and in that role, I think he's showing up, just as good as you could expect anyone to in that position. And the drive was no different. I think it's kind of encapsulated his season as a whole, to be honest. And for once, Mercedes kind of gave him the car to be quick enough to win a race, and he got it done in pretty orderly fashion. So yeah, I think that this has been George's best season in F1. But what are your thoughts? Do you think it's been his best so far, or can you think of a better one?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is certainly the best season that George has had so far in his Formula One career. I mean, you look at the start of his career with Williams, he did have some nice moments in there, 2021 especially. Right before he left for Mercedes, we get to see a little bit of his talent and his potential, as they slowly started kind of building that team back and, almost, of course, falling apart. It was tough to really see his full potential at Williams, but since he's gotten to Mercedes, he's kind of slowly built up. He's been fantastic even these last few years, going head to head with Hamilton and basically being his equal, at least from a point standard, since he's gotten to Mercedes. And then this year, I think he's taken another step forward. I certainly would have never said he had. I would certainly never say he was immature, but I think he has matured as a driver. Just learning more and more, being a mentor now for a lot of the young guys, Kimmy and some of the other young drivers. So, yeah, I think he's gone from just being a young guy out there looking to prove himself to being one of the most established and frankly, best drivers on the grid at the moment.
Yeah, I think he is one of like the benchmark guys I would say out there right now. It seems like anytime you give him the car to succeed, he does so, and he still makes his fair share of mistakes out there. Singapore a couple years back comes to mind, and some other situations like that. But really, on pace, and he still has some good overtaking skills and all that. He's got all the tools. Good on defense as well, and going back to just the season, I mean, he has 5 podiums in 10 races so far, along with the win. And then that triple header was obviously not very nice to Mercedes as a whole, as a team. So to kind of come back from that and put your foot on the gas here in Canada and really take advantage of this race, I just think it's been a really stellar season from him so far. And one I've been really happy to watch because it does add another layer to what would maybe be an otherwise kind of dominant. It is still a dominant season from McLaren, but to have guys like Max have a couple wins, have George in here now get a win. I think it's been really good for the series to have some of these other guys from other teams take a step up and really take the fight to the McLarens on certain weekends whenever they have the car to do so.
Yeah, I mean, at the start of this year, we thought that this might be one of those years where one team wins pretty much every race with a team like McLaren and how dominant they looked. And then, Max has gotten a couple now. Like you mentioned, George has one. And I still think there's one or two more guys that are probably going to win one eventually. There's still time for maybe Ferrari to figure something out or maybe someone like Kimi to get up there on the top step. So, yeah, I think this is really evolving into an entertaining season. Just beyond that McLaren battle, and one that I'm excited to see play out. I think that we could see some other teams and drivers get hot over the course of the summer, find their form, and really take it to McLaren like Mercedes did this past weekend. And I think this certainly isn't it for Mercedes either. They're not on McLaren's level week to week, but they're going to be fighting up there a number of weekends for wins and podiums.
Yeah, kind of speaking of that, do you think this is something more that we see from Mercedes, as the rest of the year goes on? I'm not sure if they brought any upgrades at all or exactly what upgrades they brought this week. I know obviously we're a race removed now from the new technical directive with the front wing. And McLaren was able to win last time out in Spain, but that also could have just suited their car so well, that track, that the directive didn't really matter. I'm glad that we saw them, not dominate the field again this week, because I think maybe that'll give some other teams and some other guys some hope. But I think that, to me, this is probably more of what we saw last year from Mercedes, where they rack up to 1, 2, 3, 4 races a year, and they're right there to compete and win the race. I'm not sure what it is about their car that makes it so track specific, that really only a handful of tracks a year they can compete for the win. The other tracks, they're there competing for podiums, but they're just not quite to that second level that we see say 2 or 3 weekends a year. And this really kind of has been the case since this new generation of car, to be honest. It's not really just a last year thing. If you think back, George had a great weekend in Brazil when he got his first win. There's been some other weekends as well since then, in 22 or in 23, last year in 24, obviously. So to me, this is kind of a thing that's been going on ever since this new generation of car, where Mercedes is just very, very track specific and track dependent. And I think that this is the same to go on the rest of the year. I wouldn't expect them to start battling for wins every weekend, but I wouldn't be surprised to see, George or Kimi, like you said, rock up and win another race or two this year for sure.
Yeah, and you look at this portion of the calendar. I think this is prime territory if we're looking at a similar Mercedes to last year. George was on the podium last year in Canada, comes back and wins this year, and then he won Austria last year, and then you've also got Belgium coming up soon, which he kind of won and then got DQ'd, and then Hamilton ended up in there. So there's a lot of potential here coming up for Mercedes these next few races. Silverstone as well. They're often pretty good at. So I think we're going to see some real great racing this next month or two between Mercedes and McLaren. Not enough to get us to a title fight, especially in the constructors. Just McLaren's built too big of a lead, but we're going to see some great racing this summer. And you really look at these, even outside of Mercedes, these next few tracks is just a murderer's row of some of our favorite F1 tracks: Austria, Silverstone, Spa. Like, we're in for some really fun racing the next month or two.
Yeah, you might be right. It might be just kind of a Mercedes summer kind of thing, to be honest. So these tracks, the way the calendar works, really seem to fit their car. Like you said last year, these are the tracks that they really heated up on, and we thought maybe going into that that kind of summer break last year that they might be able to really challenge their late. They faded pretty hard after the summer break, I'd say, but yeah, I think it's just this little section of the calendar they perform really well. And yeah, I just think that's it. Is they're good on a select few tracks, and that's that. Obviously, you mentioned he won in Austria last year. I don't think he would have won that race had Verstappen and Norris not come to blows there. But he was still, he was still ahead of the other Red Bull of Perez, and he was ahead of the other McLaren of Piastri at the time. So, he was still having a good race. And then, like you said, Belgium, they both the Mercedes had really good success there. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities for them ahead. It's just they're too far behind, like you said, definitely in the constructors, and I think probably for George, he's just a tad bit too far behind in the drivers as well. Obviously, some crazy things could happen, and like we saw with the McLarens this week, maybe they get to battling a little too hard, and they have a couple DNFs for their guys, and it maybe brings a George or a Max back into it. But that's really the only way I see those guys standing a chance in the drivers championship at least.
Yeah, no, and your point is well taken, obviously, about Austria last year. That's 100% the case, but still probably would have been a podium for him in that race regardless. And then even though he has retirement at Silverstone, Hamilton wins that race, of course. So, this is potential for a great run here for Mercedes, and not just for Russell, obviously Antonelli as well. Really finding his form, getting a sprint pole in Miami, first podium here. I know it's a George conversation, but it feels like he's due for a breakout too, and really settling into this seat. And there's going to be some more exciting stuff from him as well.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, too, George had a great chance at Silverstone last year before he had that retirement. I think he was on for a really good race, at least a podium probably as well. So yeah, that's a really good point. The other thing from this weekend, the other big thing at least, is that Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri finally go wheel to wheel in a true sense, battling for position on track. Obviously, that ends with Lando Norris crashing, trying to kind of squeeze his way up the inside, heading into turn one with, I believe, 3 or 4 laps to go. It was very, very late in the race. And to be honest, it kind of just was a weekend that went from bad to worse for Lando. Qualifying P7, it looked like he was kind of charging his way through the field, maybe on the right strategy between the two, not to win, just to make up positions from where he started. And it looked like he had a really good chance to overtake Piastri there at the end. He seemed the quicker car. It goes from, he might be able to actually make up a little bit of ground in this championship battle. If he gets past Piastri, it's a couple points. If he somehow gets past Antonelli, that's a few more points, and this thing's really tight. And you would consider it a great kind of a great recovery drive from another bad qualifying session, and one where it might kind of flip the script, and now he leaves with 0 points. Piastri leaves with a decent haul, a P4 finish for him. Not what he would have wanted in that McLaren, regardless, but what he would want in the championship. So yeah, it just seems like he's just everything that can go wrong is going wrong for Lando right now. Obviously, that one was his fault, so it's not like it was luck based or whatever. But yeah, just a bad weekend that had a bright chance, bright spot there for a minute, and then turned really, really sour for Lando. Once again in this season, kind of just keeps getting worse and worse for him.
Yeah. I mean, what more can you say? Just another, not even bad luck, just a poor decision by Lando there, trying to go for a gap that didn't really exist. But you got to give him credit to immediately admit to his mistake in the moment in the car with all that adrenaline. And then, of course, he went up to Piastri after the race and apologized as well. I think it really shows a lot of maturity from him. Even if he doesn't have the quality this year to win the Drivers' Championship, it seems like he's maturing a lot as a driver, and it certainly makes me hopeful for his future. Just one move that was a little over aggressive, and he could clearly see that. When you look back at it, and the other drivers could too. Just certainly an untimely mistake given where he's at in the Drivers' Championship. Still a lot of season left. Piastri could have one DNF in the next couple of races that totally changes things, and Norris is right back in it. It's certainly too early to say anything's done, but that's a huge blow in Norris's title chances. Just with Piastri, at least for his case, Piastri didn't win that race or even podium, so a little bit of a bright spot there. But certainly a major hit for Lando.
Yeah, it feels like every race weekend we come out of it kind of saying what you just said of, oh, he's still not out of it, but it doesn't look great, and he's going to need to kind of turn things around. Seems like we've left every single race weekend this year saying that since Australia, maybe other than Monaco, but Monaco's its own thing. So, you can kind of take what you want out of that weekend. It just, to me, the conversation right now for him, I think, needs to be around, obviously, his quality pace has just dropped off the face of the earth. After last year, he was the dominant qualifier and just couldn't, capitalize off of that during the race. And this year, it's the kind of the complete opposite. It seems like, to me, at least, I think the pace is still there for him. I think if you look at these races, he's very similar to Oscar on race pace, if not maybe even a little bit faster. Like in this race, he was hunting him down at the end. He started Oscar starting P3 and Lando starting, or Oscar starting P4. No, I think he did start P3 and Lando starting P7. And just the fact that Lando had a chance to finish ahead of him would have been, what Lando would have taken and he would have loved from that weekend after quali. So it's just like the qualifying pace is just not there at all. He really, really needs to work on that. And like that qualifying lap, he was up on Oscar at the end of the first sector. And I never saw an explanation to what happened to him, if he made a mistake, if there was some traffic he got into. I'm not really sure exactly what happened. But that lap kind of just took a tumble, and, he lost 3-4 tenths in the second sector. It was just nowhere to be seen after that. So it's just like the qualifying is obviously an issue. And then on top of that, kind of what came to blows in the race was that failed overtake. And that's also an issue to me. It seems like he kind of struggles more than anyone else on the grid, at least among the top drivers and top teams, to get those moves done where, like I at least on this one, I at least actually kind of applaud him for trying to go up the inside. I know there was no room there, but he always like plays it safe and goes for that outside move. That just never works because it's so easy to defend that, outside move if you're the driver ahead in these, big wide cars and all that. So I at least actually do kind of applaud him for trying to go up the inside. Obviously, this was probably the worst time to try it. just with the gap that was there was no gap. He was pretty much just driving straight into the wall. Um, so yeah, those are the two things for me that need to get situated: quali and then overtaking. Obviously, if the quali gets better, you might not even have to deal with the overtaking issue. But those two things really are kind of his kryptonite right now. I think if you just let him all out there for, 30, 40 laps and just said, who's going to have the best average pace at the end, I think he would have a great chance to be just as good, if not better, than anybody else on the grid, at least definitely among the Piastris, Verstappens, Russells, all that. It's just those other things that happen throughout a race that are really, kind of struggling, and things that he's, being bothered with right now.
Yeah, like you said, it's always something. I mean, when he wasn't having the quality issues, he was having the slow start issues and trouble getting off the blocks. So there's always something going on, unfortunately, with Lando. I do think, to his credit, he does clearly have the quality pace, maybe not at the moment, but last year, his domination of Piastri, even if Piastri has improved as a driver since then, I think that he clearly has the pace. And then, yeah, I mean, with the overtaking, this race actually, if he had finished off that last one, would have been a real example of some solid overtaking from Lando, and really would have been a very positive step to end this race ahead of Piastri, given, like you said, where they started. Lando starting 4 spots behind him would have been a big moment, I think, in this title race. Even if it's only a couple points extra for Lando, it would have felt like turning the tables a little bit, coming from so far behind and finishing the race ahead of Oscar in a race where Oscar didn't have any issues. But yeah, instead we're sitting here talking about this, and F1's just all comes down to these little moments, this split second decision to make a pass pretty much changed the championship outlook here. And yeah, that's kind of, that's really his main issue right now, is those split second decisions. Like you mentioned, sometimes not being aggressive enough, and then when he is being aggressive in the wrong spots. So yeah, that's kind of his next step as a driver, is developing that driver IQ a little bit, being patient when he needs to be, and then being aggressive when he needs to be. That's what the best do, and that's one of the only things right now keeping Lando from being he is one of the best, but one of those all-time greats, that kind of best.
Yeah, it's like that you mentioned that overtake at the beginning or earlier in that lap of Oscar. I thought was a great move, and it's like, those are the types of things that we want to see. I don't think Oscar was expecting him to kind of lunge from that far back, and I thought that was a really good move. Obviously, it didn't quite get finished off because Piastri was kind of able to cross back over and take the inside line into the next corner. But I thought there were moments there where you see really good racing, and then it's just he has times like this, and as someone who actually I like Lando. I think he's a really good talent, and I feel like I've supported him quite a bit. At least on this podcast, it's like there comes a time when it gets really hard to, because it's just he keeps making these mistakes, and whether it's quality or the race starts last year or some of these overtaking things, it's difficult because you see the flashes and you see the moments and you're like, okay, I know he can do that. He's just got to do it more often. I don't know if it's a confidence thing or what's been going on with him, but yeah, it's got something that's got to be changed soon. I think if he wants to make a comeback in this drivers' championship on his teammate.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting too. They're coming down this long straight into turn 13 together. Lando and Oscar side by side, and going into 13 and 14, it looked like Lando was clearly ahead. Like he looked like he could have really put his foot down there, and gotten into that corner and made Oscar back off. And instead, he backs off, lets Oscar have the corner, and then he has to come make this move back around 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just a moment of, in my opinion, just choosing the wrong time to go, the wrong time to be patient, and then the wrong time to be aggressive, um, back to back. And that's really all it comes down to at the end of the day.
Yeah, the thing with that, I think it's so hard to be on the outside right now in F1 because all you have to do if you're on the inside is just lunge a little later, break a little later, and then you can use the I'm ahead at the apex rule. And that kind of just, takes away any chance that these guys have to pass on the outside. And the cars are so wide as well that I think that would have been a really difficult move to pull off. I see what you're saying. He was ahead, and he definitely was ahead at the time. And I would have liked to have seen him take that maybe a little bit more aggressively too, but it's just so hard right now with the size of the car and kind of the rules we've established on the grid right now, with the whole ahead at the apex thing, that I think that would have been a difficult one for him to kind of make work, especially with the team situation. You're going up against your teammate. You don't want to go side by side into a corner and mess up both the guys' races there. Obviously, he makes a pretty boneheaded decision like a few seconds later, but yeah, I think there's a lot that goes into that pass. But yeah, I think that's a good point. He could have gone for that one too. There's a lot of things he could have done differently that just at the end of the day just didn't do. The other thing I've seen people kind of online saying is McLaren should have. What were you gonna say?
No, I was just going to say I think that's valid. That it's not an easy move to pull off. I think the one thing that does have going for it is that there is some runoff room coming out of that turn. We saw plenty of guys kind of take that head on throughout the weekend for whatever reason. So I know this is all decisions you're making in milliseconds, and it's not as easy as it sounds. But there is room there for both of them to bail out in that situation. So I think there's a little more incentive to be aggressive. But you're right. It's certainly not an easy move. It's not a slam dunk. And I don't want to make it sound that way.
No, that's fair. I think just it in all actuality, probably going for the move where there's a little bit of space to run off if you make a mistake, over going for the move where you're trying to overtake on the straight and there's a wall right there is probably the better decision would have been to just try and send it into that corner. So that's a good point about the runoff area. But yeah, I've seen people online say, they should have, for McLaren's sake, for the team's sake, they should have let Lando through there at the end because he seemed like he had more pace to try and attack Antonelli and all that. And my response to that is no. I'm glad that they let Lando and Oscar duke it out there and kind of really figure it out on track. Especially if Lando gets ahead and he's able to take that position away from Antonelli, yeah, that's great for Lando, but for a team dynamic, it doesn't really do a whole lot for them to ruin one guy's race to let another guy fight for P3 in their situation right now. That just doesn't really make much sense as a team. And then the other thing, I'm just glad that they let them race it out, and I hope they continue to do so because I'd rather see that than a bunch of team orders. And then the same people that say they should have let Lando through also would have been the same people who go online and complain that Lando would have finished ahead of Oscar only because he was let through and he doesn't have the race pace or the talent to overtake him. So it's like there's not really any winning in this situation. Like I get it, if you're looking at it from a 10,000 foot view and you're just looking at it from a McLaren team perspective, yeah, maybe letting Lando through is the best move to get yourself more points there. But, you have to take into consideration all the other factors that are going into constructors championships, drivers championships. You have to take care of both your drivers. You have to, I don't want to say like play to their feelings, but you have to, in a certain extent, to keep things right within the team. So there's a lot else that goes into that, and I think that they made the right call at the end of the day to just let them race it out on track.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you here. I think that obviously, selfishly, from a fan's perspective, we want to see them race it out, but also, there's really almost no constructors championship left to be had at this
Yeah.
point. I mean, I just checked on our local sports book. They had driver and constructors championship odds up all year, and they pulled down the constructors odds because it's,
It's
just there's
it's
nobody
over.
else
Yeah.
winning it this year, so they're not even offering it. That's kind of where we're at right now. And what was that?
Oh, I just said it's over.
Oh yeah, no, it's cooked. But I mean, so that's my point. Is there's no constructors fight left to be had, barring a miracle. So I think at that point you don't want to interfere in the drivers' championship. You want to let these guys duke it out. I think that could do real long-term harm to your team, your whole team dynamic if you interfere in this drivers championship when you have no incentive to, and you don't let these guys duke it out. Either guy, someone is going to come away from that feeling aggrieved over the course of a season. You're never going to get that exactly right where both guys play out the same and get the exact same number of points. So I think at this point, unless someone makes a massive charge these next 5 or 6 races, you've got to just let them fight for the rest of the year and let them play this thing out. And
Yeah, I agree. I would rather see them just fight it out on track and hope for the best there. Just with the constructors already essentially locked up, like just let them fight it out, and I think that would be better for all the fans to watch. And it's the most fair to both your drivers too. Your drivers can't come back into the end of the year and complain, I didn't win the championship because you favored this guy. Like that won't happen this year if McLaren keeps going the way that they are. So yeah, I'm all in on McLaren, just letting them race it out on track. Moving to our personal podiums for Canada, I have George Russell in first, Kimi Antonelli in second. Antonelli's first podium in F1 did great, holding off both McLarens behind. They had DRS. He didn't for the majority of that battle. I thought he did excellent in that defense. And if you saw in the cool down room, he said he was trying to figure out when the McLarens were side by side there right before he crashed. He was like, I don't know which McLaren to give the slipstream to, and he was trying to kind of decide that while he was out there. To me, that's just like super high level stuff, and I'm super excited that he's doing that at 18 years old already. I don't think it's a hot take to say he's an emerging star. I think we all know he's supposed to be the next big guy, but it really does seem like he has all the tools. I'm super here for it. I'm on the Antonelli train. I think he's gonna be great, and I'm really happy to see his first podium here in Canada. In third, you got to go back to Nico Hulkenberg. The Hulk, he's just still doing it for Kick Sauber down there. P8, another great finish for him. More points for Sauber. I mean, they might just mess around and get like 8th in the constructors this year, maybe even 7th. I mean, who knows? They're doing incredible things. All thanks to Hulkenberg. So if Sauber's able to come away with a finish other than like 9th or 10th in the constructors, you got to give Hulkenberg a little bit of I think a little bit of a bonus there for that, because he's single-handedly leading that team to places I don't think that we're really I don't think they're really capable of doing what he's doing right now in that car. So that's my personal podium for Canada. I think we had a lot of guys have really good races, but those are the 3 that I think were up there, doing the best.
yeah, this was really, I think this is one of the toughest, maybe the toughest for me that I've had to choose since we started doing this. I mean, all 3 of the guys that were on the actual podium, I think, are very much in contention for personal podium here. And then you look at a few other guys too that snuck into the points here from some struggling teams. Your Hulkenbergs, but also Alonso. With his best finish, I believe, of the year so far in 7th, was really phenomenal this weekend. And then Ocon as well, coming in 9th for a Haas team that had been kind of falling off a little bit the last few weeks. They had a really nice weekend. Behrman as well in 11th. Not really in personal podium contention, but just a good weekend overall for Haas. it's funny because I went through all these different guys. I ended up with the same three as you, but with a different order. I went with Russell first. Poland
I
wins the
thought you were going
race.
to say
And
Hulkenberg first. I was
no,
hoping.
yeah, I mean, Russell, to come in pole and win the race. This weekend they may have had the best car, but overall, it's not been the best car of the season. So, a statement performance from him. A guy that we know is capable, but every now and then just reminds us how good he is.
And fastest
And
lap,
then,
Triple Crown.
yeah, massive weekend. Um, and then I've gone with Hulkenberg second, just echoing everything you said. Um, you know, taking this team above and beyond. I really hope he gets some support next year at Audi, and I hope that Bortoleto does too, because even though he hasn't, knocked the socks off of everyone so far this year, we know that he's talented and capable. We just got to get him in the right car. Hulkenberg just knows what he's doing at this point, been in the game too long, and just really deserves to be on a different team, frankly. But I'm still enjoying seeing him getting the most out of that Sauber. And then I've gone with Antonelli third. It was tough here. I think if it wasn't his first podium, I may have given this spot to another guy. But he really was fantastic this weekend, regardless. A great drive from him. Fourth in qualifying was solid, a little bit off Russell, but certainly not too bad. And then, that first lap pass on Piastri really decided his race and was one of the would have been probably the defining moment of the weekend, in my opinion, other than, the Lando Oscar incident later in the race. So, yeah, I mean, just fantastic for a guy that's young, barely 18, still doing, I think I read he's got to fly back to Italy to do some exams this week to finish out of schooling for the year. So for a guy that young and that inexperienced, I know he came up through F2, but still only a few years here in single seaters, and coming out in F1 doing what he's doing is just so impressive. And yeah, this guy's got a lot of potential, and we're going to be talking about him for a long time.
I'm not sure if they call it high school in Italy, but is he still in high school, or is he at like university level now? I'm not sure if I know that, but I mean, 18. I guess he could still be in high school theoretically. I don't know exactly how
Yeah,
their like education thing runs over there, but
I mean, he just turned 18, so I don't know either for Italy, but in the U.S. he'd be, just graduating high school, be
yeah,
senior year. So yeah, what a guy.
that'd be so sick to show up to class with the podium trophy, just sit it down, and say, "I don't need to take the test, Miss Teacher. I'm good. I got a podium. I'm fine.
I felt bad
Give
he
me
got
an
to
A."
bring all his classmates. He got to bring all his classmates to Imola, and then had a really rough weekend there. I would have loved to have seen them all come out to Canada, and that would have been really cool instead. But um, yeah, it's crazy what he's doing at his age.
Imola had to be the worst field trip ever. Gosh, seeing your teammate just DNF at his home race, that's brutal. Ugh. Anyways, yeah, but my stinker of the week is Lando Norris. From we already talked about the qualifying bad, the race, the move not good. Just not a lot of positives to take away from this weekend. If you're Norris, the championship lead, it gets a little further away. The confidence probably takes a little bit of a hit. Yeah, just really no good vibes to take away from this race. I guess you could say, you topped a few free practice sessions ahead of your teammate, but other than that, I don't think he's going to be taking away that. So, yeah, not much to take away for him. Probably his worst weekend of the season, to be honest, this week.
Yeah, I mean, until they start giving points for practice sessions, then I think maybe this would be he'd be a little more all right with this weekend. But I tried so hard to go with somebody else, honestly, just to try and switch it up and try and lay off Lando a little bit. But unfortunately, this weekend was for him. Unfortunately, this weekend had a lot of positive performances, and we had a few DNFs, but nothing quite like what happened to him. So unfortunately, we already talked about it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more. But yeah, I've also got Lando Norris for stinker of the week this week. Just really nobody else could have taken it home, and I'm hoping to see him rebound from this one and come back swinging these next few races. But yeah, I mean, this could be the defining moment of the season, and just for that alone, he kind of has to be the stinker of the week.
I think the only other option is Alex Albon's car. I mean, from the engine cover blowing off and qualifying to just dying mid-race, that was a tough one as well. I think that's about the only other stinker of the week option for this week. And Albon, I think, was still driving a great race and actually recovered well in that qualifying, but the car just didn't want to cooperate this weekend.
Yeah, I think I would have considered Williams as a team if Sainz hadn't snuck into the points there in 10th. That was just enough for me to keep him off there. And then Racing Bulls also had kind of a rough weekend. Lawson was in the last running car before he turned the car off, and I don't even know if they had issues or if they just gave up, but was down there in 19th. And then Hadjar had his worst weekend in which he started a race, coming in 16th, I believe. Just not their weekend. But yeah, it's just not on the same level as Lando's, unfortunately.
Yeah, I feel like when Lawson came in to retire the car, they just said like they didn't want to risk the power unit or something. They were just saving it, and like it wasn't worth it at that point. So yeah, it might have just been a give up. But we'll chalk it up as an L. We'll head over to Austria and start fresh. Speaking of Lawson, he received a 50-place grid penalty for changing a gearbox under parc fermé conditions this week. My question, why have a 50-place penalty if it's not going to roll over to the next races? What's even the point at that point? Just say like a starting last penalty, like back of the pack, back of the grid penalty. There's no reason to have a 50-place grid penalty if it's not going to actually set you back 50 places on the grid. I don't know. I know that's not an important thing, but I just always find that funny when they hand them a 50, 60, 100 place grid penalty. It's like, well, that's cool. I'll just start last in the pit lane anyways. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no point. It was fun to see all the jokes around it, see everyone talking about how, he's starting from a different country or a different city or whatnot. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's kind of a useless penalty. There should just be a back of the grid penalty, where you're starting 20th or next year 22nd. That should just be the end of the deal, or they should carry it over if it's something where they really feel it's that serious. But I think for something, even under parc fermé, for something like changing a power unit, shouldn't be have a multi-race consequence. I think I get why they have the penalty, but one race starting from the back of the field, I think, is plenty for that kind of situation.
If it's not going to roll over, they can make it as many places as they want. They could do a 1,000,000-place grid penalty, and he'd start at the same place. That'd be sick if they did that. But he probably started from Toronto this week, I think, and he would have ended up in the same place. So, moving to Ferrari here, was speaking of being bad. Ferrari, this stuff continues to be an issue here. I mean, we're kind of monitoring the situation at this point. For sure, some stuff about he's on the hot seat, some rumors Leclerc leaving after 2026. Hamilton, just some comments about the car, just, not being good, not a good car to drive. I don't know exactly kind of where we go from here with Ferrari. I mean, a decent finish, 4th and 5th. Hamilton's race kind of finally looked like he was going to be ahead of Leclerc, and then his pit strategy, he did stuck in a DRS train, and there goes his race. Ends up in P5. So I just think there's a lot going on right now. I wouldn't necessarily say get rid of Vasseur. I think he's done a fine job there. I think, at the end of last year, they were really on the come up. I just think they went a bad direction with the car this year. Um, if I'm not mistaken, I think they like went a completely different direction. Like almost 100% of the car was different this year than last year. Um, and to me, I mean, that seemed like a weird decision at the time. Obviously, it's kind of not really panned out for them, just given the trajectory that they were on. Um, so yeah, there's a lot to unpack from the Ferrari stuff, but every week it seems like it's getting a little bit more contentious in that team, just from Hamilton and his engineer to the car to now some Leclerc leaving rumors, Vasseur issues. It's just not a great situation to be in right now over there, I think.
Yeah, I think a decision on Fred should really come down to what they see for 26 and where their progress is for that car, because at this point, we might get some upgrades between now and the end of the year, but this season's kind of a wash in terms of any sort of title aspirations. That's definitely down the drain at this point. I do think it's concerning that we're still having these issues with communication between the driver and team. I know that Hamilton's new, maybe give a couple races to kind of figure that out. But we're coming up on halfway through the season here in a couple races, and they're still having some pretty significant issues. Leclerc's been there, for 5-6 years now, and we're still having issues with him and the engineers. It's really, really, really poor there. From them, just kind of ignoring any takes he had on the strategy this week, saying that he was okay with one plan, and then they're like, no, we're going with the other plan. And, it feels like there's no strategy, and everything is, I know they have these plans before the race, but it feels like everything is kind of winging it during the race, and nobody's ever on the same page. So I think that is really a massive issue that's still going on, because even if your car is not where you want it to be, you can still do all the little things right and maximize what you got. And they're not even doing that right now. So I think that was just as much as building a better car. I think that's what Fred was brought in to do. And they're still struggling with that. So I wouldn't say fire him yet, unless the 26 project is really a dumpster fire. But yeah, unless they got something really great up their sleeve for next year, it's not looking good for Fred's Ferrari tenure.
At one point, I'm gonna just mute the main audio for the race and just listen to the engineers for Leclerc and Hamilton for an entire race and just see what nuggets I can find, because it seems like they always have the best driver engineer conversations. They always come from the Ferrari guys, and actually I feel like from Albon a lot this year. He's had a lot of those as well. But yeah, it's always the Ferrari crew, either Leclerc or Hamilton, that you get the best stuff from. But yeah, I think, to me, I kind of I do question if Hamilton regrets his decision to go to Ferrari, and not even because of what we saw this week with Mercedes winning, not even because the issues that Ferrari's had this year, more because, and I know it's early, but the early reports are that the 2026 engine Mercedes is far and above the best of those, and that's really what we're focusing on going forward. Obviously, this year, from a driver's perspective, was going to be a wash for Ferrari or for Mercedes. So to me, that's not really a factor here. I think more just looking ahead is Hamilton regretting that decision. I think maybe, but it's early to tell. And I think at this point in his career too, I think he just wanted something different, kind of regardless of the outcome. I think for success at Ferrari would be great and would make his legacy even greater. But I don't think it was necessarily like the only thing that he was searching for when he made that move to Ferrari.
Yeah, and I think we're not going to know for certain on that until next year. I think the silver lining for him is that even if he was at Mercedes, he wouldn't be competing for championships this year. Unless he had unless he had stayed at McLaren all this time or went back there.
Yeah.
I don't think he was going to be competing for a title. So that's a little bit of a silver lining, I guess. And I do think that either way, regardless of how this ends up, I think he'll be happy that he fulfilled that dream of being a Ferrari driver. But yeah, I mean, if we do come out next year and Mercedes is the team to beat, or you know, even one of the top teams, and Ferrari is well behind, I think that that conversation I'm sure will be had, and I'm sure he'll be having that internally, and and struggling with that a bit. But I think it's too early to make any definite decisions on whether or not the move was a mistake, or or how he's going to feel about it long term.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was more of a looking ahead thing to me rather than is what's going on right now, um, for Hamilton. But yeah, I think it was just kind of one of those dreams that he wanted to fulfill, and if it works out, it's going to be great, and if not, it's okay. He's already one of the at least in the top three consideration all time, and a lot of people will have him number one. So yeah, I think he was kind of searching for other things with this move. Um, Last thing here before we wrap up, thoughts on the track in Canada. I know you kind of touched on it a little at the beginning. The beginning of the race was kind of a little bit of a snoozer, and got pretty good at the end. And we've seen great races here in the past. Last year was pretty good, mostly because of the rain, though. To me, I actually really enjoy this track a lot more than I thought I would. Whenever we started watching um, F1, just because you think it's just kind of going to be a boring experience. You see all these other tracks, the Silverstones, the Spas, the Monacos. I know the racing's not great, but those are the ones that you hear about and about. But I feel like Montreal is always producing some solid races. To me, it's like this one and Australia are very similar in that they produce very solid races. I feel like we never get like absolute bangers out of these, but they're always really solid. And they're very similar because they're both in like a city park, and it's just kind of odd that you put a track there and it's really good. So to me, it's kind of in that conversation with Australia as a track. If I had to do like a tier list kind of thing, it'd be very similar to that. Because there's similarities in how they drive, but there's also similarities in just the area that they're in. They're in a park, so I always enjoy the race here, and it's kind of an exciting one that I feel like can fly under the radar a little bit when you compare it to some of the other tracks F1 goes to, worldwide.
Yeah, I'd kind of say it's in like a good, not great tier, which I think is about
Yeah.
probably where you'd have it too. Like, yeah, the
Hmm.
start of this race wasn't amazing. The first lap was pretty good, but once we kind of got settled in, we got some DRS trains, especially like that midfield, lower midfield was pretty much a DRS train. Almost the whole race, which can be really frustrating to watch as a viewer because it feels like the racing's close, but it's really not. You're not getting
Yeah.
a lot of progress up and down the field. So yeah, I mean, I still really like this track, even though most of this race wasn't my favorite. It's not the kind of race where you go, oh, we got to reconsider here, like we do with Monaco every year with some other tracks. I mean, uh, this I think is really should be, it is a permanent spot on the F1 calendar for a reason, and it should stay there. I like this kind of mix of it being in a city, and being sort of a street track, but really it feels more like a professional racetrack in the
Hmm.
same way that
Yeah.
these other tracks we're about to get to, going to Austria and whatnot. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. Is really like this track, and yeah, glad it's on the calendar.
Yeah, good not great is exactly how I'd characterize it too, and the history it has as well. There's been a lot of great races here, and you can go back through multiple generations of driver and car, and there's all that history whenever you come here and you know the track, and I think that always adds to the viewing level as well. So yeah, I like Canada. I just kind of wanted to see where you were at too, because I feel like it's kind of that's how it is for a lot of people, is in that good, not great tier. Kind of a little bit underrated in my opinion, just because of it's not one of the ones that you hear about the most, but um, also I think it's kind of properly rated just with where just how good the racing is. I guess every year I think it's pretty solid. So
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Same boat. Glad it's on the calendar, and I'm already looking forward to it next year. It's going to be. I'm excited to have it right after Miami too. It makes a little more sense
Mhm.
geographically, and then you
Yeah.
can really get into the European summer. So, yeah, I would exactly the same pretty much as you feel about it. Really solid. Not on the Silverstone Spa level, but glad it's here.
Yep. That's everything for this episode. We'll be back in a couple weeks, break down the race in Austria, the Red Bull Ring. Always some exciting stuff happening there. Last year, the Lando Verstappen clash, Russell sneaking his way through to a win. So yeah, should be another exciting weekend there. Do you know if that's a sprint weekend again this year, or if that's changed?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's always fun as well. I feel like the sprint races there are usually pretty good. So yeah, that's everything for this weekend. We'll be back in 2 weeks to review and go over everything that happens in Austria. Hopefully, it's a very exciting race. I think it will be just based on the history of that track. So super excited for that.
Yeah, that's always a great one. So, yeah, looking forward to it. We'll see you then.